Thomas Wells stood by the grand marble fireplace in his mansion, watching guests in expensive clothes mingle throughout his home. Tonight was his 40th birthday, and despite the champagne, the gourmet food, and the live string quartet playing in the corner, he felt strangely empty. "Smile, darling. These people came to celebrate you," his wife Vanessa whispered, appearing beside him in her designer red dress. She slipped her arm through his and squeezed gently. Thomas nodded and forced a smile. "Just tired from the Tokyo deal," he said. In truth, reaching 40 had made him think about his journey. From the tiny 2-bedroom apartment where he grew up to this $12 million estate with ocean views. 20 years ago, he was a scholarship kid with big dreams. Now he ran one of the most successful tech companies in the country. "Your mother is waving at you," Vanessa said, nodding toward the entrance. "And she seems to have brought someone who wasn't on the guest list." Thomas looked over and felt his heart skip. Standing beside his mother was a small elderly woman with silver hair tied in a simple bun. She wore a modest blue dress that probably cost less than the napkins Vanessa had ordered for the party. But to Thomas, she was the most important person who could have walked through those doors. "Eleanor," he whispered, already moving across the room. His mother, Patricia, beamed as he approached. "Surprise! I found her." Before his mother could say another word, Thomas had wrapped Eleanor in a gentle hug. The smell of her subtle lavender perfume, the same kind she'd worn for 30 years, brought back a flood of memories. "My goodness, look at you," Eleanor said, her eyes watery as she pulled back to examine him. Her hands, spotted with age and slightly shaky, reached up to touch his face. Still handsome as ever, Thomas felt a lump in his throat. Eleanor Harris had been his nanny from when he was just 4 years old until he left for college. His mother had worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table after his father left. And Eleanor had been there for every skinned knee, every school project, every nightmare. "I can't believe you're here," Thomas said. "It's been what, 5 years?" "6, Eleanor corrected with a smile. "Since your mother's retirement party." Patricia squeezed Eleanor's shoulder. "It took some detective work, but I found her in that same apartment building in Westside. I thought it would be the perfect surprise." Thomas nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "The best surprise," he finally managed. As he led them further into the party, Thomas couldn't help but notice the curious glances from his business associates and friends. Eleanor was clearly out of place among the wealthy crowd, but he didn't care. "Let me introduce you to Vanessa," Thomas said, looking around for his wife. He spotted her by the bar, deep in conversation with her friend Charlotte. As they approached, Vanessa turned and her smile faltered for just a fraction of a second before she recovered. "Hello," she said, extending her hand to Eleanor. "Welcome to our home." "This is Eleanor Harris," Thomas said with pride in his voice. "She practically raised me." "Eleanor, this is my wife, Vanessa." Eleanor took Vanessa's hand with a warm smile. "It's wonderful to finally meet you, dear. Thomas's mother has told me so much about you." Vanessa's smile remained fixed. "How nice. And you were Thomas's babysitter?" Thomas felt a flash of annoyance. "Nanny," he corrected. "Eleanor was with me from age 4 to 18. She's family." "Of course," Vanessa said smoothly. "Can I get you something to drink, Eleanor?" "Perhaps some sherry? I believe older ladies enjoy that." Thomas was about to object to the condescending tone when his business partner David called him over to meet a potential investor. With an apologetic look to Eleanor, he said, "I'll be right back." "Mom, will you—" "Go," Patricia said with a wave. "We'll be fine." For the next hour, Thomas was pulled from one conversation to another, always keeping an eye on Eleanor from across the room. She seemed to be doing fine, sitting with his mother and a few of his older relatives. He made a mental note to spend more time with her after he finished making the rounds. By the dessert course, Thomas finally broke free and looked for Eleanor, but didn't see her with his mother anymore. He made his way over to Patricia. "Where's Eleanor?" he asked. His mother frowned slightly. "She went to the bathroom about 20 minutes ago. I was just wondering what was taking so long." Thomas nodded and moved toward the hallway that led to the main powder room. As he approached, he heard voices around the corner. "Really, in those shoes? With that bag?" It was Vanessa's voice, followed by soft laughter. "I mean, did you see that brooch?" "It's probably from a department store." Thomas slowed his steps. "Listening. You'd think if she was going to a party like this, she might have at least bought something decent to wear," came Charlotte's voice. That dress looks like it's from the clearance rack at a thrift store. Well, she's the help, darling. What do you expect? Vanessa replied. Thomas has this weird attachment to her. Apparently she made him sandwiches when he was little, and now she thinks she's part of the family. Thomas felt his face grow hot with anger. Before he could step around the corner, he heard another voice. Eleanor's. Excuse me, ladies. I just need to get past. There was a moment of awkward silence. Oh, Eleanor, Vanessa said, her voice suddenly bright. We were just talking about how lovely it is to have you here. No, you weren't, Eleanor said quietly. But that's all right. I should be going anyway. It's getting late for me. Thomas stepped around the corner to see Eleanor standing there, her shoulders slightly hunched, looking much smaller than when she'd arrived. Vanessa and Charlotte stood nearby, wearing identical expressions of fake concern. Eleanor, Thomas said, is everything okay? Eleanor looked up, surprised to see him. She quickly tried to smile, but Thomas could see the hurt in her eyes. Everything's fine, dear. I was just telling your wife that I should be heading home. These old bones need their rest. Thomas looked at Vanessa, who had the decency to blush. What's going on here? Nothing, darling, Vanessa said quickly. We were just chatting. I heard what you said, Thomas replied coldly. Charlotte muttered something about needing another drink and slipped away. Vanessa stepped closer to Thomas, lowering her voice. Let's not make a scene. It's your birthday party. Thomas ignored her and turned to Eleanor. Please don't go. The party's just getting started. Eleanor patted his arm gently. I've had a wonderful time seeing you, Thomas. You've grown into exactly the man I always knew you would be, but it is late and I should call a taxi. At least let me drive you home, Thomas insisted. Your mother can take me, Eleanor said. She's ready to leave too. You stay and enjoy your party. Before Thomas could protest further, his mother appeared. There you all are. Eleanor, ready to head out? Eleanor nodded, visibly relieved. Mom, did you hear what happened? Thomas asked. Patricia gave him a look he recognized from childhood, the one that said, not now. We'll talk tomorrow, she said quietly. Thomas walked them to the door, hugging Eleanor tightly and promising to visit soon. As he watched them leave, he felt Vanessa come up beside him. Don't be angry, she said, sliding her hand into his. Come back to the party. The Hendersons are asking about investing in your new software. Thomas pulled his hand away. We'll talk about this later. For the rest of the evening, Thomas went through the motions, smiling at jokes, discussing business opportunities, thanking people for their gifts. But inside he was seething. The image of Eleanor's hurt face kept flashing in his mind. It was past midnight when the last guest left. As the catering staff cleaned up around them, Vanessa approached him cautiously. You're still upset, she said. Thomas looked at his wife of 5 years, beautiful, poised, and suddenly like a stranger to him.
How could you speak about Eleanor that way?
Do you know what she means to me? Vanessa sighed. I'm sorry if I offended your old nanny. I was just having a private conversation with Charlotte. She's not just my old nanny, Thomas said, his voice rising. When my mom was working 3 jobs, Eleanor was there. When I was sick, she sat up all night with me. She used her own money to buy my school supplies. She never missed a single one of my baseball games. Darling, that was her job, Vanessa said dismissively. Thomas stared at her. No. Her job was to make sure I didn't burn the house down while my mom was at work. Everything else, the love, the support, the sacrifice, that was because she cared. Vanessa rolled her eyes slightly. You're being dramatic. It was just a little harmless gossip, at the expense of someone I love, Thomas replied. Someone who helped make me the man I am today, the man you married. He walked away before she could respond, heading to his office and closing the door. Sitting at his desk, Thomas pulled out his phone and looked at an old photo he kept there, himself at high school graduation, with Eleanor beaming proudly beside him. Thomas made a decision then. Eleanor deserved better, and he was going to make sure she got it. What he didn't know yet was that his next move would shock not just Vanessa, but his entire family. Thomas barely slept that night. He tossed and turned in the guest bedroom, replaying the hurt look on Eleanor's face. By morning, he had dark circles under his eyes and a heaviness in his chest that wouldn't go away. He showered and dressed early before Vanessa was awake. The house was quiet except for their housekeeper, Lily, who was already preparing breakfast in the kitchen. Good morning, Mr. Wells, she said. You're up early. Thomas nodded, accepting the coffee she offered. Couldn't sleep. I'm going to head to the office for a bit. He was halfway to his car when his phone rang. It was his mother. Thomas hesitated before answering. He wasn't ready for the conversation he knew they needed to have. "Hello, Mom," he said, sliding into the driver's seat of his Tesla. "Thomas Anthony Wells," his mother began, her voice tight. "We need to talk about what happened last night." Thomas sighed. "I know. I'm sorry Eleanor had to—" "Do you know she cried in my car?" Patricia interrupted. "That proud woman who never shed a tear when your father left us, who worked through pneumonia because she couldn't afford to miss a day's pay, who smiled through her husband's funeral. She sat in my car and cried because of how your wife treated her." Thomas closed his eyes, feeling sick. "What exactly happened, Mom? I only heard part of what Vanessa said." His mother took a deep breath. It wasn't just what Vanessa said in the hallway. All evening she was making little comments, asking Eleanor if she'd ever eaten caviar before, telling her friends loudly enough for Eleanor to hear that some people just don't know how to dress for these events, asking if Eleanor needed help using the fancy bathroom. With each example, Thomas gripped his steering wheel tighter. "Why didn't you tell me this was happening?" "Eleanor begged me not to," Patricia replied. "She didn't want to ruin your birthday." She kept saying, "He's done so well for himself. I don't want to embarrass him." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on Thomas. Eleanor worried about embarrassing him while his own wife had no problem humiliating someone he loved. "I'll fix this," Thomas said firmly. "You'd better," his mother replied. "That woman changed your diapers, nursed you through chicken pox, and helped you with your college applications. She deserves better than to be treated like dirt in your home." After hanging up, Thomas didn't go to the office as planned. Instead, he drove aimlessly, thinking about his childhood. He remembered Eleanor's tiny apartment where she sometimes watched him when his mom worked nights. How she'd made blanket forts with him in the living room. How she'd taught him to make pancakes shaped like animals. How she'd saved for months to buy him a decent calculator for his advanced math classes, because she knew he needed it. And now, she'd been mocked and belittled in his mansion, a house that existed partly because of her care and encouragement. By the time Thomas returned home in the afternoon, his sadness had hardened into resolve. He found Vanessa by the pool, sunbathing with a magazine and a glass of white wine. "We need to talk," he said, sitting in the chair beside her. Vanessa lowered her sunglasses. "You're still upset about last night? I thought you'd be over it by now." "My mother called," Thomas said flatly. "She told me everything that happened." Vanessa sighed and sat up. "Your mother exaggerates. I was perfectly civil to your nanny." "Her name is Eleanor," Thomas said sharply. "And being civil isn't the same as being kind or respectful." "Fine. I'm sorry if I wasn't sufficiently reverent to Eleanor," Vanessa said, her tone making it clear she wasn't sorry at all. "But honestly, Thomas, she was out of place at that party. My friends were asking why the help was mingling with guests." Thomas stared at his wife, truly seeing her for perhaps the first time in their 5-year marriage. "The help? Is that how you see people who don't have money?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic. I do loads of charity work. I just think there's a natural order to things. Your little nanny story is sweet. Poor boy makes good, remembers his roots, but you don't actually invite the gardener to dine with the guests." Thomas stood up, disgusted. "Eleanor isn't the gardener, Vanessa. She's family. More family to me than you're acting right now." "Oh, please," Vanessa scoffed. "Just because your mother hired her to babysit you, she did more than babysit me." Thomas snapped, his patience finally breaking. "When I was 8 and had the flu, she slept on our couch for 3 days because my mom couldn't miss work. When I was 12 and got bullied for my second-hand clothes, she took a second job cleaning offices at night so she could buy me a new jacket for my birthday. When I got my scholarship to MIT, she was the one who helped me pack and took the bus 8 hours to help me move in." Vanessa looked startled by his outburst. "Though, you know what she did with the money I tried to give her after my first company took off?" Thomas continued, his voice breaking slightly. "She put it in a fund for kids in our old neighborhood who needed after-school care. She never spent a penny on herself." Vanessa was silent for a moment. Then she stood up and touched his arm. "I didn't know all that. But can you see it from my perspective? These parties are important for our social standing. My friends' opinions matter." Thomas pulled away from her touch. If your friends judge me because I care about the woman who helped raise me, then maybe we need different friends." "You don't mean that," Vanessa said. "Everything we've built." "What exactly have we built, Vanessa?" Thomas asked quietly. "A life where we look down on people who don't have what we have? Where we humiliate someone because her clothes aren't expensive enough? Is that the kind of success you want?" Vanessa's face hardened. "You've changed since you hit 40. Having some kind of midlife crisis about your humble beginnings. Well, I married Thomas Wells, the tech mogul, not Thomas Wells, the charity case from the wrong side of town." Her words hit him like a slap. Thomas stepped back, suddenly feeling like he was looking at a stranger. "I need some time to think," he said finally. "Fine. Go to the office. Cool off, you'll see I'm right," Vanessa replied, picking up her wine glass. But Thomas didn't go to the office. Instead, he went to his private study and closed the door. For the next several hours, he made phone calls. To his lawyer, to his financial advisor, to a real estate agent he trusted. By evening, he had the beginnings of a plan. The next morning, Thomas left before dawn. He drove to the West Side neighborhood where he'd grown up, where Eleanor still lived in the same modest apartment building. The area had declined over the years, with more boarded-up storefronts and graffiti than he remembered. He parked across from Eleanor's building and waited until he saw her come out with her shopping cart. Wednesday was senior discount day at the local grocery store. Thomas quickly got out of his car. "Eleanor," he called. She turned, surprised, then smiled when she saw him. But her smile faded as he got closer. "Thomas, what's wrong? You look terrible." He managed a small laugh. "Thanks. I haven't slept much." Eleanor's eyes were concerned. "Is this about what happened at the party?" "Because you don't need to worry about that. I've dealt with worse in my 72 years. That only made Thomas feel worse. "I'm so sorry, Eleanor." "What Vanessa did," Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "Your wife comes from a different world." "I understand that. That's no excuse," Thomas said firmly. "I talked to my mother. I know everything that happened." Eleanor sighed. "Patricia shouldn't have told you. It was just a few thoughtless comments." "It was cruel," Thomas corrected. "And I won't stand for it." Eleanor studied his face. "What are you planning, Thomas?" "I know that look. It's the same one you had when Bobby Taylor stole your bike in 6th grade, and you were plotting how to get it back." Despite everything, Thomas smiled at the memory. "I need your help with something, Eleanor. And I know it's going to sound strange." "Go on," she said cautiously. "I have a guest house on some property by the lake. It's sitting empty. I was wondering if you'd consider staying there for a few weeks." Eleanor frowned. "Why would I do that?" "Because I'm working on something important," Thomas said. "Something that will make things right. But I need a little time, and I'd feel better knowing you were comfortable while I figure it out." "Thomas Wells," Eleanor said sternly, "if this is some way of giving me charity—" "It's not charity," Thomas insisted. "It's a favor to me. And it would only be temporary, I promise." Eleanor looked skeptical. "Does this have something to do with your wife?" Thomas hesitated, partly. "But it's bigger than that." "Please, Eleanor. Trust me on this." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Your mother always said you were too stubborn for your own good. Fine, but only for a few weeks and only as a favor to you." Thomas felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "Thank you. I'll have someone pick you up tomorrow morning. Pack whatever you need." As he drove back home, Thomas felt more certain about what he needed to do. The confrontation with Vanessa had revealed cracks in their marriage he couldn't ignore. But this wasn't just about his marriage. This was about honoring someone who had shaped his life and teaching a lesson his wife desperately needed to learn. The lake house was everything Eleanor had imagined and more. Nestled among pine trees with a view of sparkling blue water, the guest house turned out to be a beautiful 3-bedroom cottage with a wraparound porch. "This is your idea of a guest house?" Eleanor asked as Thomas's driver, Ron, carried her suitcase inside. "Mr. Wells said to make sure you have everything you need," Ron said with a smile. "The fridge is stocked and there's a phone with my number programmed in if you need anything else." Eleanor walked through the house in wonder, running her fingers along the smooth granite countertops in the kitchen, testing the softness of the sofa in the living room. Through the back windows, she could see a small dock extending into the lake. "This is too much," she murmured. "Mr. Wells also asked me to give you this," Ron said, handing her an envelope before saying goodbye. Inside was a note written in Thomas's familiar handwriting. Eleanor, please enjoy the peace and quiet. Take the rowboat out if you want. It's easy to handle. I'll come visit in a few days when I've sorted some things out. Consider this a long overdue vacation. You spent years taking care of me. Let someone take care of you for a change. With love, Thomas. Eleanor smiled, folded the note, and tucked it into her pocket. Then she stepped out onto the porch, breathed in the clean pine-scented air, and decided that maybe she could get used to this, just for a little while. Meanwhile, Thomas had been busy. For 3 days straight, he worked from his home office, making calls, having meetings with his lawyer, and developing what his assistant started calling the plan. Vanessa had noticed his unusual behavior but seemed to think it was best to give him space. She went about her normal routine of yoga classes, lunch with friends, and charity committee meetings as if nothing had happened. On the 4th day, Thomas finally emerged from his office looking tired but determined. He found Vanessa reading by the pool. "We need to talk," he said. Vanessa looked up from her book. "Are you finally ready to apologize for overreacting about your nanny?" Thomas shook his head. "No. I'm ready to tell you what's going to happen next." Something in his tone made Vanessa put her book down and sit up straighter. "What does that mean?" "I've done a lot of thinking," Thomas said, sitting across from her. "About my life, our marriage, and what kind of person I want to be." "And?" Vanessa asked, looking wary. "I'm organizing a family dinner here tomorrow night. I've invited my mother, my brother Jack and his wife, my sister Katie, and your parents." Vanessa's eyebrows rose in surprise. "A family dinner? In the middle of the week? What's the occasion?" "I have an announcement to make," Thomas said simply. "Something important." "What kind of announcement?" Vanessa asked, a note of panic creeping into her voice. "Thomas, if this is about divorce—" "It's not about divorce," Thomas interrupted. "At least not yet. It's about something else entirely." Vanessa looked confused. "Then what?" "You'll find out tomorrow along with everyone else," Thomas said, standing up. "I'd appreciate if you could make sure the dining room is ready for 8 people at 7 o'clock. As he walked away, Vanessa called after him. "Thomas, you can't just say something cryptic like that and leave." But Thomas kept walking. He had preparations to make. The next day passed in a blur of activity. Thomas spent the morning at his office downtown, meeting with his board of directors. In the afternoon, he visited his lawyer to sign some final paperwork. By 6 o'clock, he was back home, dressed in a crisp blue shirt and dark slacks, waiting in the foyer as the first guests arrived. His mother came first, her face tight with concern. "Thomas, what's going on? Your message was very mysterious." "You'll see, Mom," Thomas said, kissing her cheek. "Just trust me." Next came his brother Jack and sister-in-law Brenda, followed shortly by his sister Katie. Last to arrive were Vanessa's parents, Richard and Diane, looking polished and slightly puzzled. "Vanessa says you've been acting strangely," Richard said as he shook Thomas's hand firmly. "Everything all right with the company?" "The company's fine," Thomas assured him. "Let's all have a drink before dinner." The family gathered in the living room, making small talk while Vanessa hovered nervously, keeping the conversation flowing and the drinks refreshed. Thomas noticed she'd chosen to wear his favorite dress, a subtle blue number that matched her eyes. A peace offering, perhaps. At precisely 7 o'clock, their housekeeper announced that dinner was served. The family moved to the dining room, where the table was set beautifully with Vanessa's best china and crystal. Once everyone was seated and the first course had been served, Thomas cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. "I'm sure you're all wondering why I asked you here tonight," he began. "I have something important to tell you, a decision I've made that will affect our family." The room grew silent. Vanessa gripped her napkin tightly in her lap. "As you know," Thomas continued, "I've been fortunate in business. What many of you don't know is how much of that success I owe to someone who believed in me long before anyone else did. Besides you, Mom," he added with a small smile toward his mother. Patricia nodded, her eyes suddenly misty. "I'm talking about Eleanor Harris," Thomas said. "My nanny from age 4 until I left for college." Vanessa shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her parents exchanged glances. "Eleanor did more than watch over me," Thomas went on. "She shaped who I am. She taught me to work hard, to be honest. to treat others with kindness regardless of their status or wealth. When I was struggling with advanced math, she found a retired teacher who tutored me for free. When I wanted to give up on my college applications because we couldn't afford the application fees, she helped me write letters explaining my situation so they'd be waived. Thomas took a sip of water before continuing. At my birthday party last week, Eleanor was treated disrespectfully in my home. He glanced briefly at Vanessa, whose face had turned pink. That made me realize something important. I haven't done enough to honor the people who helped me get where I am today. Thomas's brother Jack leaned forward. "What are you saying, Tom?" "I'm establishing a foundation," Thomas announced. The Eleanor Harris Caregivers Foundation, with an initial endowment of $20 million. Gasps echoed around the table. Vanessa's mother put a hand to her throat. "$20 million," Vanessa whispered. "Thomas, that's a drop in the bucket compared to what she gave me," Thomas finished firmly. The foundation will provide support for nannies, home health aides, and other caregivers who often work for low wages while providing essential support to families. It will offer education grants, emergency financial assistance, and retirement planning. Katie smiled broadly. "That's wonderful, Thomas, truly." "There's more," Thomas said. "I've asked Eleanor to serve as the chairperson of the foundation. She'll have a salary of $150,000 annually, plus benefits." This time, Vanessa couldn't contain herself. "You're giving your childhood nanny a six-figure job?" "Thomas, she has no experience running a foundation." "She has a lifetime of experience caring for others," Thomas countered. "And she'll have a professional staff to handle the technical aspects." Richard, Vanessa's father, cleared his throat. "It's your money, Thomas, but this seems rather excessive." "I disagree," Thomas said calmly. "But there's one more thing." The tension in the room was palpable as everyone waited. "I've purchased a house for Eleanor," Thomas said. "It's being renovated now and will be ready in 2 weeks." "How thoughtful," Patricia said, beaming with pride at her son. "Where is this house?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight. Thomas met her eyes steadily. "Next door." The silence that followed was deafening. "Next door," Vanessa repeated faintly. "As in the Petersons' old house? The one that just sold for $4 million? Thomas nodded. "That's the one." Vanessa's mother looked faint. "You're moving your nanny into our neighborhood? Into the house right next to yours?" "Eleanor is not just my nanny," Thomas said firmly. "She's an important part of my life, and yes, she'll be living next door." Vanessa stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Excuse me," she said, her voice shaking before hurrying from the room. Thomas's sister Katie whistled low. "Well, that went about as expected." "Thomas," his mother said gently, "while I completely support honoring Eleanor this way, I can understand why this might be difficult for Vanessa to accept all at once." "I agree," Jack added. "It's a lot to take in," Thomas sighed. "I know, but sometimes doing the right thing isn't easy." Richard stood up. "I should check on my daughter." "With all due respect, Richard, I think I should be the one to talk to my wife," Thomas said, rising from his chair. He found Vanessa in their bedroom, pacing back and forth. "How could you do this?" she demanded as soon as he entered. "How could you make such huge decisions without even discussing them with me?" $20 million! A house next door! Thomas closed the door behind him. "I didn't think you'd support my decisions." "Of course I wouldn't," Vanessa cried. "It's insane. You're throwing away millions on some sentimentality." "It's not sentimentality," Thomas said quietly. "It's gratitude. It's respect. It's doing right by someone who did right by me." Vanessa shook her head. "And what about doing right by your wife? Do you have any idea how this makes me look? The woman I humiliated is now going to be my next-door neighbor? So you admit you humiliated her," Thomas noted. Vanessa deflated slightly. "Fine, yes, I was rude to her. I'm sorry. But this is punishment, isn't it? You're punishing me." Thomas moved closer to her. "No, Vanessa. This isn't about punishing you. It's about me finally stepping up and being the man Eleanor always believed I could be." Vanessa searched his face. "And what about us? Where does this leave our marriage?" Thomas took a deep breath. "That depends on what happens next." 3 days after the family dinner, Thomas drove to the lake house to see Eleanor. The morning was bright and crisp, with sunlight dancing on the water as he pulled up to the cottage. He found Eleanor sitting on the dock, her feet dangling just above the water's surface. looking more relaxed than he'd seen her in years. "This place has been good for you," Thomas said, joining her on the dock. Eleanor smiled, squinting up at him against the sun. "I've slept better here than I have in decades. No city noise, no neighbors arguing through thin walls. Just the sound of water and birds." Thomas nodded, pleased. "I'm glad." "So," Eleanor said, studying his face, "are you going to tell me what you've been up to? Your mysterious plan?" Thomas took a deep breath. "I have something to tell you, and I want you to hear me out before you say anything." Eleanor's expression turned serious. "That sounds ominous." "It's not, I promise." Thomas explained everything, the foundation, the salary, the house next door. As he spoke, Eleanor's eyes grew wider. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she shook her head slowly. "No, Thomas, I can't accept this. Why not?" Thomas asked, though he'd expected this reaction. "It's too much," Eleanor said firmly. $20 million. A mansion in your neighborhood? People will talk. They'll say I manipulated you or that I'm taking advantage. "I don't care what people say," Thomas replied. "Well, I do," Eleanor said. "I've lived my whole life with my head held high. I've never taken charity." "This isn't charity," Thomas insisted. "The foundation is about helping people like you. Caregivers who work hard for little recognition and less pay. You're the perfect person to run it precisely because you understand what they go through." Eleanor shook her head again. "And the house? How is that not charity?" "Consider it back pay," Thomas said with a small smile. "All those hours you spent with me when Mom was working late. You never charged overtime." Eleanor didn't smile back. "Thomas, I appreciate what you're trying to do. But this feels excessive, and what about your wife? I can't imagine she's happy about having me as a neighbor." Thomas's expression tightened. "Vanessa will have to adjust." "So this is about punishing her," Eleanor said softly. "No," Thomas said quickly. Then he sighed. "Maybe partly, at first. But it's more than that now. It's about doing what's right." Eleanor reached out and patted his hand. "You've always had a strong sense of justice, even as a little boy. Remember when you were 7 and you gave your new winter coat to Billy Chen because his family couldn't afford one?" Thomas smiled at the memory. "Mom was so mad, until she understood why you did it," Eleanor reminded him. "And then she was proud, just like I've always been proud of you." They sat in comfortable silence for a minute, watching a pair of ducks paddle across the lake. "I won't change my mind about the foundation," Thomas said finally. "The world needs it, and you're the right person to lead it. As for the house, will you at least look at it before you decide?" Eleanor sighed. "I'll look, but no promises." The next day, Thomas drove Eleanor to see the house. As they pulled up to the stately brick home with its manicured lawn and circular driveway, Eleanor gasped. "It's even bigger than I imagined," she said faintly. Inside, workers were busy painting and installing new fixtures. The foyer opened to a grand staircase, and sunlight streamed through tall windows in the living room. "There's an elevator if the stairs are too much," Thomas pointed out as they toured the house. "And the main bedroom suite is on the ground floor, so you wouldn't need to go upstairs if you didn't want to." Eleanor walked through the rooms in a daze, occasionally touching a wall or countertop as if to make sure it was real. When they reached the sunroom at the back of the house with its wall of windows overlooking a garden, she finally stopped. "It's beautiful," she admitted. "But Thomas, it's not me. I'd be rattling around in here like a pea in a drum." "You could have family stay with you," Thomas suggested. "Your niece from Ohio and her kids." Eleanor considered this. "Linda would love it, and the children would enjoy the pool." "There's also the practical side," Thomas pressed gently. "The foundation office will be downtown, but you could have meetings here when needed. There's a perfect room for a home office." He could see Eleanor wavering, considering the possibilities, but then she shook her head. "Even if I said yes to all this, what about your wife? Thomas, I don't want to be the reason your marriage falls apart." Thomas led her to a bench in the garden. "Vanessa and I have reached an understanding. 2 nights earlier, after their guests had left and the house was quiet, Thomas and Vanessa had faced each other across their bedroom. "I'm not backing down on this, Vanessa," Thomas had said firmly. "The foundation is happening. The house is happening. Eleanor will be a part of our lives." Vanessa's eyes had flashed with anger. "Then what am I supposed to do? Smile and pretend I'm happy about it? Watch my friends whisper behind their hands when they see her at the neighborhood pool?" "You have 2 choices," Thomas had replied calmly. You can divorce me, and yes, there is a prenup, but I'll be generous, or what? Vanessa had demanded. Or you can work at the foundation with Eleanor. For 1 year. Vanessa had stared at him as if he'd grown a second head. Work with her? Are you joking? I've never been more serious, Thomas had said. 1 year. You'll be the deputy director, focusing on fundraising and social events, which you're good at. You'll report to Eleanor. That's insane, Vanessa had sputtered. I'm not working for your nanny. Then I guess we're getting divorced, Thomas had said, turning away. Wait, Vanessa had called out. You're really serious about this? Thomas had looked back at her. Completely. 1 year, Vanessa. Learn what it means to truly care for others, not just write checks at galas. See firsthand what people like Eleanor do every day. Maybe then you'll understand why she means so much to me. Now, sitting in the garden with Eleanor, Thomas simplified the story. Vanessa has agreed to work at the foundation too. As your deputy. Eleanor's jaw dropped. That perfectly dressed, perfectly manicured woman is going to work under me. Thomas, that's a disaster waiting to happen. Or, Thomas countered, it's an opportunity for growth. For both of you. Eleanor looked skeptical. I doubt it. But even if I were willing to try, why would she agree to such an arrangement? Thomas hesitated. Because the alternative was divorce. Eleanor's face fell. So I'm coming between you two? No, Thomas said firmly. Vanessa's behavior, her values, or lack of them, are what's coming between us. This is a chance for her to show me she can change, that she can see beyond wealth and status. And if she doesn't change? Thomas shrugged. Then at least I'll know I tried everything before walking away. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed deeply. I must be crazy to even consider this. Thomas felt a surge of hope. Does that mean you're saying yes? It means I'm saying maybe, Eleanor corrected. I need to think about it. And pray about it. This is a big change, Thomas, he nodded, understanding. Take all the time you need. The lake house is yours for as long as you want it. On the drive back to the lake, Eleanor was quiet, looking out the window at the passing scenery. Finally, she turned to Thomas. Tell me honestly, are you doing all this because you feel guilty? Because you think you owe me something? Thomas considered the question carefully. I do owe you something, Eleanor. More than I can ever repay. But that's not why I'm doing this. Then why? Because you taught me that success isn't just about making money. It's about making a difference, Thomas said. When I was 10 and I told you I wanted to be rich someday, do you remember what you said? Eleanor smiled slightly. I said a lot of things to you over the years. You said being rich isn't about having the most. It's about doing the most with what you have. Thomas glanced at her. I've made a lot of money, Eleanor. Now it's time I did something meaningful with it. When they reached the lake house, Eleanor got out of the car but leaned back in through the window. I'll give you my answer in 2 days, she said. But whatever I decide about the house or the job, I want you to promise me something. Anything, Thomas said. Give your marriage a real chance, Eleanor said seriously. If Vanessa is willing to try, then you need to be open to the possibility that she can change. People can surprise you, Thomas. I've lived long enough to know that, Thomas nodded slowly. I promise. As he drove away, Thomas felt a strange mixture of hope and uncertainty. He'd set events in motion that would change all their lives forever. Now he just had to wait and see where those changes would lead them. The next morning, Thomas was surprised to find Vanessa in the kitchen when he came down for breakfast. Usually she slept late. We need to talk, she said, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. Thomas sat down warily. About this foundation? If I'm going to do this, and I still think it's insane, I need to understand exactly what I'm getting into. Thomas blinked in surprise. You want details about the foundation? Yes, Vanessa said firmly. If I'm going to be deputy director, she stumbled slightly over the title, then I should know what that entails. For the next hour, they talked about the foundation's mission, structure, and goals. To Thomas's astonishment, Vanessa asked intelligent questions and even offered a few useful suggestions about potential donors. You've really thought about this, Thomas said finally. Vanessa met his eyes. I meant what I said, Thomas. I'll try. I can't promise to become best friends with Eleanor, but I'll give this a fair shot, Thomas nodded, feeling a tiny flicker of something he hadn't expected, a renewed sense of possibility for their marriage. Thank you, he said quietly. Vanessa stood up. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if we all survive the next year. As she walked away, Thomas wondered if Eleanor might be right. Maybe people could change after all. Including Vanessa. Including himself. 6 months later, the Eleanor Harris Caregivers Foundation was in full swing. The modern glass offices in downtown took up the entire 20th floor of the Wells Technology Building. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the busy staff as they worked on various programs and initiatives. In her spacious corner office, Eleanor sat across from a young woman who was fighting back tears. "I don't know what I would have done without this grant," the woman said, clutching the approval letter. "My daughter needs special therapy, and I can't afford to cut back my nanny hours to take her." "That's exactly why we created the Emergency Health Care Fund," Eleanor said warmly. "Caregivers need care too sometimes." After the woman left, Eleanor leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile. In just 6 months, the foundation had provided grants to over 200 caregivers, established a scholarship program for those seeking additional education, and created a retirement planning service that had already helped dozens of aging nannies and home health aides secure their futures. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Vanessa holding a stack of folders. "The donor reports you asked for," she said, placing them on Eleanor's desk. "And the guest list for the fall fundraiser is finalized. We're at full capacity with a waiting list." "Excellent work," Eleanor said. Vanessa hesitated, then sat down in the chair opposite Eleanor. "There's something else. I've been thinking about the mentorship program. What if we expanded it to include career transition support? Many of the nannies I've spoken with are interested in related fields once their charges grow up. Teaching, social work, child psychology." Eleanor raised her eyebrows, genuinely impressed. "That's a wonderful idea. Can you draft a proposal?" "Already started," Vanessa said, a hint of pride in her voice. "I'll have it on your desk by tomorrow." As Vanessa turned to leave, Eleanor called after her. "We make a good team, you know." "Better than I expected." Vanessa paused at the door. "Yes," she said softly. "We do." After she left, Eleanor picked up a framed photo on her desk, a picture from the foundation's launch party 3 months earlier. In it, she stood between Thomas and Vanessa, all three smiling. It wasn't a fake smile from Vanessa either, which had surprised Eleanor at the time. Things had changed since that awkward beginning. Not overnight and not without difficulty, but they had changed nonetheless. Eleanor had ultimately accepted both the position and the house, though she'd insisted on some modifications. The mansion had been partially converted to include a small dormitory for caregivers in crisis, those who needed temporary housing due to abusive employers or sudden homelessness. The pool house had become a daycare center, where nannies could bring their own children while they attended foundation training programs. Eleanor still marveled at how different her life was now. She'd gone from stretching her small pension to cover basic necessities to heading a major foundation with 30 employees. From a cramped apartment with noisy neighbors to a beautiful home where her family could visit any time. But the most surprising change had been in Vanessa. At first, Vanessa had approached her foundation duties like a chore to be endured, showing up precisely on time, doing exactly what was required, and leaving the moment her hours were complete. She'd been polite but distant with Eleanor, clearly uncomfortable with their new power dynamic. Then came the home visit that changed everything. 2 months into the foundation's operation, they'd gone together to meet an applicant for their emergency housing program, a nanny in her 50s who'd been let go after 15 years with a family when they decided to move overseas. The woman had nowhere to go and no savings, because she'd sent most of her earnings back home to the Philippines to support her own children. Eleanor had watched Vanessa's face as the nanny showed them the storage unit where she'd been sleeping among the family's possessions. She'd been asked to watch until the moving company came. They didn't even know I had nowhere to go, the nanny had explained, wiping away tears. I didn't want to worry them. They were good employers. The children, I loved them like my own. In the car afterward, Vanessa had been silent for a long time. Then she'd turned to Eleanor with tears in her eyes. That could have been you, she'd said quietly. If my mother-in-law hadn't been able to keep employing you, that could have been you. Yes, Eleanor had answered simply. It could have. From that day forward, Vanessa had thrown herself into the foundation's work with unexpected passion. She'd started coming in early and staying late. She'd used her social connections to secure major donations. She'd even defended Eleanor to her own mother, who'd made a snide comment at a family dinner about Eleanor's meteoric rise from servant to executive. Eleanor was never a servant, Vanessa had snapped. She was an educator, a caregiver, and a surrogate parent. She deserves every bit of recognition she's getting now. Thomas, who'd witnessed this exchange, had nearly fallen out of his chair in shock. Now, as Eleanor put down the framed photo and turned back to her work, her phone buzzed with a message from Thomas. "Dinner tonight at our place? I have news." Eleanor texted back her acceptance and spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing grant applications. By 6 o'clock, she was walking the short path between her house and Thomas and Vanessa's, enjoying the warm evening air and the scent of flowering jasmine. Thomas opened the door before she could knock, greeting her with a warm hug. "Something smells delicious," Eleanor said as she followed him inside. "Vanessa's cooking," Thomas said with a grin. Another surprise development of the past few months. In the kitchen, Vanessa was putting the finishing touches on what appeared to be a roast chicken with vegetables. "Hope you're hungry," she said to Eleanor. "I might have gone overboard." "It looks wonderful," Eleanor said, still getting used to this new, more domestic version of Vanessa. "Thomas says you have news?" Thomas exchanged a glance with Vanessa, who nodded. "Let's sit down first," he suggested, pulling out chairs for both women. Once they were settled with food on their plates and wine in their glasses, Thomas cleared his throat. "I've been offered a position on the President's Commission for Caregiver Support," he announced. "They want me to chair a task force on developing national standards for employment protections." "Thomas, that's wonderful," Eleanor exclaimed. "It's because of the foundation," Thomas said. "The work we've done has gotten attention in Washington. But here's the thing. I'll need to be in D.C. at least 3 days a week." "Oh," Eleanor said, understanding dawning. "That will be hard on your marriage with Vanessa working here." Vanessa put down her fork. "Actually, that's the second part of our news. I'll be staying here to run the foundation's day-to-day operations. As acting director." Eleanor blinked in surprise. "Acting director? But I'm not going anywhere." Thomas and Vanessa exchanged another look. "We were hoping you might consider a different role," Thomas said carefully. "As chair of the board, it would involve less daily management and more big-picture guidance. Plus public speaking, which you've become quite good at." Eleanor sat back, processing this. "You want me to step back from running the foundation?" "Not step back," Vanessa corrected quickly. "Step up. The board chair would have final approval on all major decisions. You'd be the public face of the foundation, the visionary. I would handle operations under your guidance." Eleanor studied Vanessa's face, looking for any sign of the old scheming, status-conscious woman who had humiliated her at Thomas's birthday party. Instead, she saw only sincerity and something else, respect. "This isn't about pushing me aside?" Eleanor asked bluntly. "Absolutely not," Thomas said firmly. "I've learned too much from you to want that," Vanessa added quietly. "The foundation needs your heart, Eleanor. Your experience, your wisdom. I just thought maybe I could help carry some of the daily burden." Eleanor took a sip of her wine, considering. "And this arrangement would allow you both to maintain your marriage while Thomas works in Washington?" "Yes," Thomas admitted. "But we wouldn't suggest it if we didn't think it was also best for the foundation. Vanessa has shown real leadership these past months." Eleanor had to agree with that assessment. Against all odds, Vanessa had transformed from a reluctant participant to a passionate advocate. She'd mastered the foundation's programs, built relationships with key stakeholders, and even spent her weekends visiting caregivers in their homes to better understand their needs. "I'll think about it," Eleanor said finally. "It's a big decision." Later that evening, as Thomas walked Eleanor home, the stars were just beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" Thomas asked, gesturing between their two houses. "When you were heating canned soup for my dinner in our old apartment?" Eleanor chuckled. "Never in a million years. Are you happy, Eleanor?" Thomas asked, suddenly serious. Eleanor thought about the question. Her life had changed so dramatically in the past year, from quiet retirement to running a multi-million-dollar foundation, from near poverty to wealth, from loneliness to being surrounded by purpose and people. "I am," she said truthfully. "Not because of the house or the money, though those things are nice. I'm happy because I'm still making a difference, still helping people who deserve better than the world gives them. Thomas smiled. And what about Vanessa? Do you think she's changed for real? Eleanor nodded slowly. People can surprise you. Sometimes they just need the right motivation, the right opportunity to become their better selves. Like when you pushed me to apply to MIT even though I was afraid of failing, Thomas recalled. Exactly like that, Eleanor agreed. Sometimes people rise to meet the expectations you set for them. At her front door, Thomas gave her another hug. Whatever you decide about the board position, I want you to know that you've already accomplished something remarkable. Not just with the foundation, but with Vanessa, with our family. Your next move certainly bewildered us all, Eleanor said with a smile, echoing the words Thomas's sister had used at the fateful family dinner 6 months earlier. Sometimes bewilderment is the beginning of wisdom, Thomas replied, as Eleanor watched him walk back to his own house. Where Vanessa waited on the porch, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The young boy she had helped raise had become not just successful, but good. And in his goodness, he had helped others find their own better selves, including his wife and in some ways Eleanor herself. Tomorrow, she would tell them yes to the board position. It was time for a new chapter, one where she could guide and mentor while also enjoying the life she had earned through decades of caring for others. Time to pass some responsibility to the next generation, even if that generation included someone she never would have expected. Life, Eleanor reflected as she entered her beautiful home, was full of surprises. Sometimes painful ones, sometimes wonderful ones, but it was the surprises that kept you growing even at 72, and she wouldn't have it any other way.